As I'm looking at the draft EIR for our Grayson Power Plant, I'm a little concerned. I'm actually quite concerned because it looks like this permutation of the repowering of Grayson will result in higher emissions, which I think runs counter to our commitment to the Paris Agreement. And therefore, I'm seeking the support of one of my council members, fellow council members, to instruct staff to pause with the Grayson, with the process that we're going forward on Grayson, not stop it, but pause it, and come back with an exhaustive, comprehensive analysis of all the alternatives that are out there, which will achieve our goal of limiting emissions and decreasing them and complying with the increasing demands that are imposed, thankfully imposed on us by our state authorities, and at the same time to make sure that it's not, cost prohibitive. It's not such where our residents will be detrimentally impacted by the results. So I think we need to look at, again, comprehensively look at all technologies and practices which will make this possible for us, and then decide how we want to proceed, because I think we've already so far committed serious resources to the repowering of Grayson, and we're still committing serious staff resources in preparing it for something which we may turn out to be the wrong option for us. So
I'll second that with the caveat, if we haven't already done that, if that hasn't already
I haven't seen it. If you've seen it, remind me
when
that was done.
You're talking about the mayor's, Paris
No,
mayor's...
no, I'm talking about the
study,
studies,
comprehensive
the
study for
so
alternatives.
I would second that, yes.
I mean, pausing the entire process
No.
to study? Because that's what he's...
That is what I'm asking for.
Oh,
Pausing the entire thing in order to...
Maybe have Mr. Zern briefly address kind of what
Okay.
we're doing, because to Mr. Sinanyan's question, I mean, that is part of the comprehensive environmental analysis.
all right.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are at what I would say the home stretch of the EIR process, which addresses and this is a process that isn't driven by the city of Glendale, it's driven by the state of California. And in that evaluation, you will see all of the impacts of the project, whether it's on the air, the water, whatever it may be, traffic. It also looks at alternatives, which we can have a very robust discussion. That's coming to you on March the 6th. The comments are being responded to now. We plan to release those to the public so they have at least a month in advance before we come to meet with you. There's no commitment that's required, but that meeting will be an opportunity for you to get a comprehensive review of the environmental impacts, exactly what they mean. Because I think some people are looking at some numbers which mean one thing, and there are other numbers totally being disregarded that would I'm not saying would change your mind, and I don't think you're looking to have your mind changed, but more give you a broader perspective on the whole project. So I think it's unfair to focus on one particular issue or one very minute particular issue when you can look at the whole picture and then make your decision, and that was our objective. And it'll be a very robust conversation, Mr. Sinanyan, and actually as robust as you want it to be, but it'll be a thorough presentation and we can go through and dissect that. Inside of that document is also alternatives. So we have to list alternatives.
Does the draft EIR have those alternatives?
Oh, yes.
I mean, I don't think it's deep enough and it's comprehensive enough.
Well, then the final EIR will expand on that even more. And then that discussion, we can discuss each and every one of those alternatives.
So, and I'll just say this, and I've asked for support, and whether the support is there or not is my colleague's choice. It's okay, but this process is geared towards repowering of Grayson. So the goal is to repower Grayson. It's not to let's look at what the universe is, what technologies are being offered to us, what our alternatives is, and based on that, let's decide whether we want to move forward with the repowering of Grayson. And those are two different things. Those are very two different ways to approach this issue. I'm saying I think the right thing to do in order for us to remain committed to the Paris Accord, and something that when I proposed it, I took it seriously. So it wasn't just a piece of paper or a feel-good issue that I was advising or I was calling for our council to adopt. It was serious. It's a commitment. You commit to it, you stick by it. But when we're saying, okay, this is the EIR for the repowering of Grayson, and by the way, these are some issues that you may want to consider. Still, at the end of the day, the goal is the repowering of Grayson, as opposed to, okay, where are we going? Where are we? Where will we be tomorrow? What the technologies are going to be, and is it worth investing $500,000 and increasing our emissions somewhere from 25 to 70%?
And I think
$500 million, that's what I meant.
$500
$500 million.
in the document, well, go back to the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan that we started with that reviewed all of those items, and then coming into a more refined process through the EIR process where we talk about those again. We have to go through the EIR process to repower Grayson. Repowering Grayson is one aspect of an integrated plan. There's no question today, as the law stands, we have to have 50% renewables by law by 2030. So that we're working towards. It's very possible that could be 100% if the state legislature is able to pass that legislation.
By 2045.
Or 2045, or some variation of that. There's some trouble on that one, but some variation, carbon-free versus renewable. And so we looked at that, our portfolio, our proposed portfolio, our transmission restrictions in totality with the repowering of Grayson. And I think that one of the things that has been mentioned, that I haven't heard anybody, even opponents, say, we don't think that you can function without a Grayson. It's just what size is that facility. Those options are also in the EIR. So sizing that facility from something a third of what we're asking or proposing to the existing 250 megawatts, and then combining that with some other technology. And I can tell you this, without getting into details because we're not quite there yet, technology has changed dramatically in 3 years. And I'm not sure that all the council's aware, but I built in to this process 3 years ago the option to always be able to go back and look at that technology again, and if it had gotten to a point where it became more desirable economically or operationally, we could fold that back in. So let me give you one example. Siemens contract, of which you all approved the limited notice to proceed. That was for 4 operating units. That contract allows us, without any penalties, without any restrictions, to eliminate those up to 2 of those units. We can eliminate up to 2 of those units without any ramifications. No legal ramifications, no cost ramifications, nothing. Why would we do that? Because if certain technology advanced during the period from when we did the IRP till today, we might have an opportunity to change our mind and not be penalized for it, have to start all over again, and that type of thing. And we've built that into the EIR as well. So, for instance, without, again, divulging too much, battery storage is a different story today than it was 3 years ago. It's a different story today than it was 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And I have been out pounding the pavement looking at battery storage facilities, as many as I can find, mostly those through Edison. They are the ones that have put the most investment into it. But 2 things have happened. Their investment has made the economies of scale a lot more attractive to us as a smaller utility. They've also shown how operationally you can integrate the batteries into your overall grid system with a couple different options. That makes a big difference to us. That now changes possibly what I would tell you when we came to you in the EIR process as another option you might have today that we didn't think we had 3 years ago because the situation was different. So what I'm getting at is there's plenty of flexibility in this, all the way up to and including go back and look at it. But I guess my advice to you, my recommendation to you would be, we are this far along in the EIR process. Let us present that to you, go over all of the environmental impacts, and then we can make a decision from there where we want to go. Do we want to go forward? Do we want to pick an option? Do we want to go back and study certain aspects more closely?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
A little bit earlier you said about Siemens.
Yes, sir.
2 of the units, there are 4 units, 2 of them we can have it and eliminate it, but the other 2 definitely we have to have it?
Under the contract, so when you price out a contract, so we bought 4. We wanted 4 originally. And in that contract, if you go back to change order and say we've decided to reduce the contract, oftentimes you'll pay penalties for that. We don't have to pay penalties if we reduce that. So we built that into the contract.
We are obligated to take the 2.
No, you haven't given a final notice to proceed. That final notice to proceed will come later in the spring. So you don't have any obligation to do anything right now. But what I'm saying from a costing perspective, if you said we wanted a little bit smaller gas-fired generation and maybe some other options, because as I said, things have changed, you have the ability to tell through this contract to say we want to reduce with no penalties. So that was built into also the construction contract.
To the issue which Councilman Sinanyan brought up, so the way I understand it, let's say in March, there will be a report in front of us,
Correct.
and we can change that or ask for new study. Am
You
I right?
absolutely can.
We are not obligated
You
to
have no
follow
obligation.
through that.
No, sir. No, sir. You can direct us a different way. You can ask us to go out on a particular option or options and look at them more thoroughly. But we will present all of that to you from the actual environmental impacts and not just somebody taking one sentence in a document and giving you a gross number. We'll give you the details of what that means. I'll give you a comparison about, Grayson today versus Grayson proposed, and how those offsets are different and what the impacts and what's driving those impacts. And then you'll see the alternatives, and then you can make a choice as to whether you want to go forward with the project, a variation of the project, or don't go forward at all and study further some other aspect of the project, another alternative.
Councilmember Najarian.
May I make a suggestion? I understand that it's coming March 6th, but we've all seen those preview shows, right? Preview to the Oscars. Can you come back in February without giving us the conclusions of what you're going to be saying in March, but come back and tell us what we're going to be presented with, what type of things, that we'll be getting options, we'll be getting air quality evaluations, we'll be getting technology issues, just so you sort of set the stage for us and the public to better understand what we're going to be presented with on March 6th.
I would be more than
It's
happy.
kind of what you're doing now.
Right.
But because this is not a simple issue to grasp, the EIR is a complicated document driven by state law. But come to us a few weeks before you drop the bomb on us, not the bomb, before you give your full presentation, and let us know what we're going to be presented with. One of the issues was alternatives. Let us know what type of things we're going to be seeing in the alternatives. Let us know about the air quality issues. Let us know about the power needs issues. Let us know about the cost issues to set the stage for us. So when you come in March, not just us, but the public as well, because they're very interested in this. Clearly, we've had a lot of comment on that. So we have a little better understanding about what we're going to be presented, and perhaps some of these issues that are raised by Mr. Sinanyan can be ready to be focused and concentrated on when we do get that ultimate download of information that you're going to give us.
I'd be happy to do that. The schedule has us releasing the responses to the comments the first week of February. I would shoot for that day, which would be a month before our projected council date to come back with the draft or the final EIR. So I could give you a preview a month ahead of time if that was.
It would help me. I don't know about my colleagues, but even having been through this and other EIRs for many different projects, I think it's good for my understanding and analysis just to get the framework, to understand what this EIR does, what our options will be in March as a council, and it, because there's just a lot of information going around. I think if we can focus it and compartmentalize it, it'll make for a better analysis by all of us and the public as well.
I would be happy to do that.
Councilmember Agajano.
In November, when you announced that there is cutoff date of November 20th, I guess, for the public comments, right? And I said at that time, what's this rush for? And still, I wanted to make sure that we are not going to rush into this project. We have to take time and look through every alternative, as has been mentioned here, especially considering the GE and Siemens, both of them, they are scaling down their gas units section. They are letting some of their employees to go. It means it's not I mean, the cities, they are not buying, or the companies, they are not buying those units anymore as they used to buy. And I will bring the report that why they're reducing, how many employees they let them go, because cities, they don't want to get involved with this as much as we are anxious to get those units. So we have to look through the alternatives and pick up the best solution for our city and for the public, specifically $500 million, and then this is a bond, right?
Correct.
And by the time we pay back, will be $1 billion. And I just wonder, still I'm wondering, who will pay for it? This, residents of Glendale should pay for it, I assume. Am I right?
Well, that's,
Sorry,
that,
Mr. Mayor, sorry, members of
Yeah.
council, we're getting into a lot of
So,
policy discussion.
since
I mean, I think the question
I
is,
asked
do we want to have a
something,
report?
And I'm going to reiterate it again, and I guess, whatever happens, happens. I think the EIR is the EIR for the Grayson repowering. There's no escaping it. At the end of the day, it's going to be geared towards Grayson being repowered and what can we do otherwise. I think an analysis of an important issue like this has to stand on its own. So the alternatives, or sort of the universe of options, has to be a study that's separate from the EIR in order to be objective and be comprehensive and stand on its own. So for that purpose, again, I'm asking my colleagues if so that we don't have to discuss this issue in March and say, well, why do we wait this long? To do it now, just pause it, do the analysis. I mean, the city of Los Angeles is doing this with all the plants that it wants to repower. It's hired independent companies to do an analysis. Oxnard, the plant that was actually shut down, it was rejected because it was relying on gas and just didn't make sense. They've gone back and they're looking for an alternative method of doing it. So that's what I'm proposing. I'm saying let's put up the, push the pause button, look at only the alternatives, and then we can pick up from there.
And I would just, that action, that would have to take place at a subsequent meeting.
Okay,
Couldn't
well,
do it here.
yeah, I'm saying, if I
You're asking, I always took your request to agendize a discussion of basically suspending the approach on Grayson.
Oh, I assume that's what has to happen.
Yes.
It has to be agendized.
It would.
Yeah,
The question is, what's agendized and when?
yeah.
Next year? Obviously.
Well, obviously, but are we doing it in January? Are we doing it in February?
Yeah, I mean,
February is fine.
as soon as possible, obviously. My choice is first meeting of the year.
Also February is fine.
And again, maybe at that first meeting of the year, as Mr. Zern has explained, we could provide information as it relates to what Mr. Sinanyan's asking, as well as provide some information to date in terms of what we have done and the alternatives that have already been looked at to see where council may possibly want to go. So we might be able to answer 2 questions possibly at that meeting and continue to keep the March 6th date, I would say, as it relates to the EIR piece, to come back to council unless we get different direction at the council meeting in January.
and as Mr. Najarian requested, I can bring that report back at that time, at least the preliminary report, and you can have that additional information. Because I think, Mr. Sinanyan, that the alternatives are there. You are doing the EIR based on the repower of Grayson, but you have to look at all the alternatives, and it's very easy for you as a council to tell us to look at one more closely than another one, if that's your desire. I can go into some detail about that. Some of these other studies that people are talking about, I know in Ventura and in LA, the biggest issue there is they're using seawater to cool their electrical facilities, and that's against the law. So they have to very quickly figure out how they're going to cool their equipment.
I think we are going a little bit too far on this item because this is not agendized. There was a motion to agendize this item to come back to the council and make a decision on it. Meanwhile, is it a date certain? Can we do it in late January? Because the first meeting, I think it will be a little bit difficult because we have a lot of items that is already being scheduled on, but maybe second meeting of the January.
If that's the 23rd?
That would, 23rd, that would give you some time to put all the other information that Councilmember Najarian indicated together and bring a comprehensive report as to the alternatives besides the idea of repowering Grayson, have an alternative as to, let's say we shut down Grayson tomorrow, what are we gonna do? That alternative, I think that's what you're asking for, an alternative that is not
Certainly
set towards.
not suggesting that we shut down Grayson
No.
tomorrow.
No, what I'm saying is, you're asking for an alternative that has nothing to do with repowering Grayson.
I want the alternatives or the entire
That's-
universe of options to be looked at independently of repowering Grayson. In that version, repowering of Grayson will be one of the alternatives, as opposed to repowering Grayson being the choice and then the alternatives being the ancillaries.
Alternatives in conjunction with powering Grayson partially.
Repowering Grayson is an alternative.
And I think there's been a lot of focus on Grayson, so obviously we've done a tremendous amount of work on building our renewable portfolio. So maybe I need to do a better job of bringing that information to you so you can see what's been done, what's been planned for the future. And
Okay.
I'll integrate that in there as well.
I mean,
One last comment from Councilmember Devine, and this is going to be scheduled for the 23rd, right? Okay.
Okay, I think one of the concerns of Councilmember Sinanyan was the greenhouse gas emissions, so be sure to include as much
Absolutely.
information in there as.
And we'll have
and
the
mine too, Astrid.
data from AQMD by that particular time, so that'll be very pertinent to air quality issues. We don't set those, the AQMD does.
Okay. Any more questions from Mr. Zareh?
I've been receiving lots of calls and input on Grayson in my office, both from Glendale residents and also from other political offices asking me if I was going to take a position. I've been asked to speak with the council members individually about it, which I knew would be a Brown Act violation, so I didn't want to do that in a serial way. So I hope you apologize that I came tonight, and it's here obviously to support what Councilmember Sinanyan suggested as far as alternatives. As you know, there's significant legislation working through the Capitol that would basically put some shackles on plants like this. And I think whether they've passed now or they will pass in the future, and I think that's very important to the conversation. So I wanted to add that Sacramento perspective. The state is serious about its green policy, and it's going to affect plants like Grayson. So this letter outlines my comments. You recently adopted the unanimous resolution in support of the United Nations Paris Agreement by joining the Mayor's Council action agenda that was brought up earlier. I think that's significant. I think the deficiencies that we already know in the process and the environmental dangers that are potentially being caused, I think warrant that pause and warrant the city to look at alternatives. So out of respect for the citizens that have been contacting me and the other politicians that have been asking me to wade in, I thought it appropriate to come tonight and share my perspective and do it publicly and openly and in writing. So with that, thank you for letting me do that, and you all have my comments.
Glendale does not need a $500 million gas-powered plant that will spew more pollutants into our environment. I asked the city to explore, and you are, as of this evening, or perhaps you already were, the potential of renewable energy alternatives to a gas-fired plant. Surely an independent study by a respected team of clean energy specialists will suggest a healthier and safer plan which would be better for the environment and perhaps more economical too.
I'm here tonight also very encouraged to hear what's happening with the alternatives for the power plant. I'm here because a lot of my friends and also colleagues that work at CSUN and live in Glendale have families and kids, and I'm here tonight and they're getting ready for the holidays because city council meetings are hard to attend. But there's a lot of people in the city that want sustainable energy. We want options for what renewable energy is going to look like in the city. We don't want to move forward on a fossil fuel plant without seeing what the alternatives are. And so I do really want to urge and encourage you guys to move forward on making sure that those alternatives are made available for folks to see, that we look at the different debates, the issue, that we're well informed, and that also our busy residents in the city, like I said before, that have kids and families and jobs and et cetera, have multiple options to kind of hear what's happening with the power plant, that the city really reaches out and we don't have just talking points from the city, but we also really look at what the issues are.
I can't tell you how heartened I am by some of the things that I heard tonight. I feel like you guys are hearing us. Thank you so much. My whole neighborhood of the Rancho District is talking about this, and I'm here, and I'm sure there's 100 others that would be here too if they could. I have a son that attends the Franklin School, and so we live in a little ecosystem that's 1 mile from this facility. So this really is important to us. My son has had asthma for most of his life, and we've been here about 7 years now. We love it here. We'd like to stay, but honestly, if I see this plant getting any bigger than it is right now, and with all of the new emissions that it would be creating, I don't know if we can stay. It's within 1 mile, and all that stuff is going to be right around us. So thank you for listening to that point. Our family has taken advantage of your Wonder for Solar Incentives program, and we've installed solar on our roof, and we've invested in battery storage. So I planted trees, I plant plants, we've reduced our own power use. So we're doing everything that we can to make our environment cleaner and nicer, clean the LA River, everything that we can do. But we still have to breathe the same air. So it doesn't matter all these things that we're doing if you guys aren't with us and helping us to keep the air clean and make it cleaner. And I feel like now is, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, it's a golden opportunity for us to invest in something really incredible for our city. The prices are falling, as we all know. There's all these new technologies available, and I'm glad to hear that you're strongly considering that. I love the fact that Mr. Sinanyan has brought up the fact that right now it's all been focused on Grayson and what Grayson thinks and how Grayson could expand. I love the idea that Grayson could be looked at as an auxiliary and that we look at what Glendale needs as a repowering, as Grayson can be part of that. And to that end, my main point tonight is to really encourage you guys to consider, like Mr. Sinanyan brought up before, pausing this process and bringing in independent clean energy specialists that aren't associated with the plant, that can truly look at all of the alternatives for us so that you guys can make an informed decision that's not centered on Grayson, but that could be part of it. I read a very compelling report recently, comments from the Earth Justice. I don't know if you guys got a chance to read that yet. They, first and foremost, this new study, it needs to be based on our actual need here in Glendale. All of the proposals that have been put out in the draft EIR have based everything on higher need than we actually have. And we all know that. Part of that is because they hope to sell some of that energy to pay for that plant. So none of it was balanced. How can we know if we can satisfy our energy needs with alternative battery storage, energy efficiency, if we aren't looking at the same numbers? Earth Justice actually goes on to say that for this and other reasons, the draft EIR is actually unlawful and would be challenged in court. As they very clearly laid out, you can't purport the need for carbon offset credits, which, as you know, wouldn't do anything to help our air quality here or the earth. And you can't poo-poo the ability to meet demand with renewable energy options or even compare costs if you don't start with a level playing field. So I think we have to decide what is our need and can we fulfill that with other energy sources.
I have 2 kids, 6 and 3. My older son attends Franklin, and we also live in an apartment across the street. So my 6-year-old spends almost 24 hours a day in the shadow of the 5. So this is an environmental justice issue for me and my family. This is not just existential, this is very real to us because this is the air that we breathe every day. And I really appreciate you guys. We do feel like you've heard us, and we really appreciate the comments that you've made here tonight. And we can tell that you're taking this seriously, and we sincerely ask that you do explore all of the renewable energy alternatives that are on the table. I was at the GWP Commission meeting a couple of weeks ago when the report was presented, and I read through as many pages of the 1,500-page draft EIR as a regular resident can possibly be expected to do. And I don't feel like the renewable energy alternatives have been explored, and I don't think that the consultant that's been hired to do this project is frankly qualified or free from the biases that we would need in order to truly explore what renewable energy alternatives are. And I don't think that the pollution that we can expect from an expansion of the Grayson Power Plant should be referred to as minute. I think, adding the equivalent of additional 90,000 cars into Glendale's roads is a pretty significant deal. And I would encourage you strongly to look really closely at those greenhouse gas particulate matter numbers, because that's what's entering my children's lungs every day. And as the previous commenter said, we love living here. I wouldn't choose to leave, but the environmental concerns and the air quality here is a really big factor for me. And Glendale already doesn't meet federal air quality standards. I cannot understand why, when California is moving towards a zero emissions future, why Glendale would not want to be part of that solution and continue to hold our state back. I mean, do we want to wait until this is a mandate coming from Sacramento, or do we want to lead and show the people of Glendale that we care about their health, we care about the economic vitality of this city, and do we need really a $500 million polluting behemoth down the street from our schools and our neighborhoods? So I'll be at the January meeting, and we really, really appreciate you hearing us, and we look forward to that measure.
I'm here tonight to ask that you please consider having an independent review firm look into alternative renewable energy solutions to Grayson. We need to find out if there are cheaper and cleaner solutions to the current plan. What's my personal interest in this? My parents live 1.5 miles away from Grayson, and building a plant like this, and should an earthquake hit, would be disastrous to them. Not to mention the nearby homes, the schools, the businesses, the nearby parks. Again, others alluded to the issue of air quality. Glendale's air quality on a scale of 0 to 100 is at 43, which is below the federal standard. And then we're talking about adding an additional 90,000 cars worth of greenhouse gases. So that, together with the pollution that would be added with this proposed power plant, given that I have a background in public health, I know would add to the numbers of asthma cases, add to the numbers of cancer cases, and having had relatives who have been diagnosed with such diseases, I really wouldn't want anybody to go through something like that if I could help it. So that's why I'm here today. So I respectfully ask that you take this opportunity to stand up for the welfare of the residents of Glendale by recommending a fair review of alternative energy options to be conducted without further delay.
I had a whole speech prepared, but I'm going to throw it out because things changed tonight. So I want to start by thanking Councilmember Sinanyan for raising the point and putting something on the agenda for the I guess it's the 20, whatever the date is, the 23rd or something like that. But I want to thank all of you. One thing that I've found is you've all been very, very open to taking time to sit down and talk through this. I've met with every one of you, I think more than once. So I do really want to thank you. It's amazing to live in a place where there is such access to decision makers and where there's so much openness. So thank you for that. The only other thing that I wanted to say is just on this question of which Councilmember Devine, you asked, is there already an alternative study in the EIR? And I would say there really isn't. A couple things about the EIR. First of all, or about the whole proposal. First of all, we have to remember who put it together, right? The original proposal was put together by Pace Global. We know Pace is a subsidiary of Siemens, and Siemens is the selected vendor for this plant, okay? We also know that Stantec, who has been running the whole EIR process, is the owner's engineer on the project and stand to gain substantial business for this to go ahead. So I don't feel comfortable relying on their analysis of alternatives. What they did, if you look at the studies, if you look at the IRP, you look at the EIR, they created straw men and then knocked them down. That's not the way it should be done. We really need to look at a broad matrix of options, including solar, including storage, but also things that are often overlooked, like energy efficiency and demand response. The cheapest energy is the energy that we don't use. It's the cheapest and the cleanest, right? We don't even need to build batteries using
whatever those those chemicals were that you were talking about the other time, the lithium ion, right? And there are lots of techniques to get residents, provide financial incentives to get residents to shift demand to other times of the day, so that we're not seeing these peaks at particular times, and we don't have to build to that peak level. We can build to a much lower level. That already, just that can reduce the scale of the problem and maybe open up completely new possibilities for using solar and for using batteries to solve our problems. So we really haven't done the kind of study that needs to be done. And one other thing, if you listened at the hearing that was done in this room, the first EIR hearing, Matthew Hale, who is one of the commissioners, asked the Stantec consultant whether they had looked at the potential of solar on rooftops owned by the city. So we're not talking about residential, we're just talking about city-owned. And the answer, and you can go back and take a look at this, his answer was, no, we have not looked at that. Now, how can you say this is an alternative study when the consultant did not even look at city properties? I think that's something to think about. So I really want to thank you once again for listening and for agreeing to be open-minded about this, and going back to the climate mayor's resolution that you passed. I was happy when you did that, but always you wonder, is it just lip service? Well, now I'm seeing it's not just lip service. I'm seeing it's real and it matters to you, and I appreciate that.
We have, as I said before, 23 solar panels on our roof. At the time that we were getting the panels installed, we wanted to put in 30 solar panels. However, in Glendale, residential solar is constrained by your historic use. You're only allowed X number of panels, where X is computed by GWP based on your past usage. I'm here to make a modest proposal that if that requirement were to be eliminated, and if residential solar customers were allowed to put as many panels on their roof as their roof could hold, that would result in a great deal of excess electric generating capacity that would be to the benefit of the city of Glendale. I'm not suggesting that residential solar owners be compensated for everything. I would be happy to pay 80% or to get back 80% of the excess electricity. I don't want 100% of it. I'm happy to give any excess essentially free to the city of Glendale to either use locally or resell. And I think if a modification similar to what I'm suggesting could be made, it would be a good way of increasing our generating capacity. We're seeing huge technology changes, as you all know right now. We're seeing less and less emphasis on transmission of electricity from faraway places to storage of electricity. And we're seeing it not only with battery technology, but with companies that are doing things like pumping water uphill into reservoirs during the day when electric rates are cheap, and then at night allowing it to flow downhill through hydroelectric generating stations. And these are all ways of storing power rather than transmitting power. And I'm convinced that for the future of Glendale's energy production and for the future of the Grayson Power Plant, what we really are going to need is a combination of expanded solar energy production within the city coupled with storage capacity. San Diego Gas and Electric right now is implementing the largest battery storage facility in the country. And I think if we were able to do those things, we can maybe do a more modest upgrade of Grayson, not quite the full-blown $500 million solution that's being presented, but something much more scaled down that could be complemented by other energy sources. And want to wish everyone Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Epiphany, and we'll see you next year.
Same to you.
Mr. Wiseman, welcome to the world of generating and distributing power.
Excuse
So that's
me,
what
I
happens
just-
in,
if you may.
yes.
I just want to echo what Mr. Wiseman was saying, that I have solar panels and they limited me, saying we have to look at how much you used previously, and they're limiting us. So I think that's a good idea that we let people to have as many panels as they want, since we have all these panels. So this is alternative energy or clean energy, better than solar panels, but people they can generate, that would be the best. Thank
Okay.
you.
Also, his proposal of having the default of folks continuing with the service that they have, I think is the logical choice.
I think we should thank Mr. Wiseman for ending our year on suggestions for issues that we have, and not just coming here and kind of not doing that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.